And we do that through the 4 ways that you see on your screen, through our global diplomacy, our legislative advocacy, our coalition building, and our strategic communications. AJC has the largest social media following of any Jewish organization in the world, numbering almost 3 million. As far as where we do our work, you could see a map in front of you. I won't tell you where all of those dots are. Maybe we could do a quiz later. But in the United States, there are 24 regional offices. We have 12 overseas offices, and I'm very excited that this year we will open our 13th office in the UAE. And we enjoy partnerships with nearly 40 Jewish communities across the globe. Our presence can be felt on 6 continents in nearly 50 countries, and it really is quite the blessing to be able to work for an organization where I could pick up the phone and call a colleague in Paris or in parts of India or anywhere where you see those dots on the screen. It really is something special. Because of our focus on global diplomacy, AJC has access to individuals all over the world. And when you see on the screen that 110 of the 193 UN member states, those aren't just meetings, those are relationships that we have built over time and individuals that really seek out AJC's advice for some of the most challenging issues that they may be encountering when it relates to their Jewish communities in their countries. And as I mentioned, that number has increased. It's close to 3 million now with our following on social media, which has really helped us during this pandemic, with everything being virtual. When we launched our Advocacy Anywhere programs in March, which I'm sure many of you have participated in, we have reached almost 6 million people in those programs since March. So let's get started. I really appreciate, again, the invitation to join you all this evening to review the state of anti-Semitism in America in 2020. This information that we pulled from this report is so crucial for AJC's data-driven advocacy work and really informs our work with our members of Congress, with our interfaith intergroup, civil society partners, and all our interactions with platforms across the country and across the world. Before we get started with the actual survey, it was really important to AJC that we felt very, very confident about the methodology that was used. So in order to do that, we contracted with a very reputable public opinion firm called SSRS. And this is a firm that's been used by CNN, by Pew, by ESPN, so many others. SSRS conducted phone interviews with 1,334 Jewish Americans over the age of 18 in September and October of 2020. And as you can see, with a 4.2 margin of error. It's important to understand that this sample size makes up the largest and most comprehensive Jewish organizational polling ever done of Jewish Americans. Between September 15th and 20th of 2020, SRSS also interviewed 1,010 adults from the general public with a 3.7 margin of error. And the result is 2 parallel surveys that provide us insight into attitudes and perceptions of anti-Semitism for both American Jews and the general public. I also want to point out that this report follows AJC's groundbreaking 2019 survey of anti-Semitism in America. And for the first time, it also gauges what the general public thinks about anti-Semitism in America. When we think about the massacre of the Tree of Life in the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh in October of 2018, it was a wake-up call for American Jews to the rising levels of anti-Semitism in the United States. So last year in October of 2019, in order to ascertain how American Jews were feeling, we released our first survey of American Jews on their opinions regarding anti-Semitism. But there were still so many questions that remained. We weren't sure if Pittsburgh was a wake-up call for Americans as a whole. We weren't sure what the general public thought about anti-Semitism. We weren't even sure if they were aware of the increase. So bringing these 2 surveys together into one report really provides us with that information that is so important for us as a Jewish community to really guide our work moving forward. So we'll dive right in. And again, a lot of numbers that I'm about to throw at you. There will be plenty of time to talk through these. We'll start by going through some of the general takeaways of both surveys. The bottom line, as you could probably imagine, is that American Jews are concerned about anti-Semitism. 88%, or nearly 9 in 10 American Jews, believe that anti-Semitism is a problem today. Over 1/3 believe that it's a serious problem, while over half say that it's somewhat of a problem. We also saw that 82%, as you could see on your screen, of American Jews believe that anti-Semitism has increased over the past 5 years, and almost half, or 43%, say that it's increased a lot. Now, keep in mind, the last 5 years includes the murders in Pittsburgh, in Poway, in Jersey City, in Muncie, and the continuous attacks against Jews in Brooklyn. We have FBI data that we'll share shortly as well as other sources that demonstrate an increased number of incidents. But as we'll also see in a few moments, the majority of the general public is not actually aware of this increase. Over 1/3 of American Jews, or 37%, say that they have been the target of anti-Semitism, either online or offline in the past 5 years, 37%. That high number certainly reveals that there's so much more that needs to be done to combat anti-Semitism in America. What I also want to point out is of the American Jews who experienced an anti-Semitic incident, 3 in 4, or 76%, did not report it. 76% did not report it. Very concerning to us. A lot of people ask the question, why? Why would that large of a number of a group not report this? The one reason may be that many Jews don't report because they believe nothing's going to change, or it's this feeling of resignation in fighting anti-Semitism, or that it may not be serious enough. So this feeling of normalization of anti-Semitism. Both really need to change. We also need to make sure that law enforcement understands and is taking seriously all forms of anti-Semitism, and that the data that is collected is appropriately reported. Jews should feel that anti-Semitism is taken seriously and report it when they experience it. And that's why AJC in our legislative advocacy has been a supporter of the No Hate Act, which aims to provide resources to adequately track hate crimes in all 50 states. It's passed the House of Representatives, and we're currently continuing our advocacy efforts as it relates to getting it passed in the Senate. We also saw that American Jews continue to hide their Jewishness. 1 in 4 American Jews have avoided publicly wearing or displaying things that might identify them as a Jew over the past 2 years. Furthermore, we saw that almost 1 in 3 Jewish Americans have avoided certain places or situations out of fear of their comfort as a Jew. And there's many examples that I've seen over the last couple of years just right here in Chicago, and it's heartbreaking to me and something that we know that we really need to address. Now, one of the significant aspects of this report was our ability to compare American Jewish perceptions and responses between 2019 and 2020. Now, of course, that's only a year, so some of the numbers were roughly the same or did not change at all, for instance. In 2019 and 2020, the same percentage, 88% of American Jews believe that anti-Semitism is a problem in America today. But some of the data was actually really different. In answer to the question, do you avoid certain places, events, or situations out of concern for your safety or comfort as a Jew? In 2019, as you can see, that percentage was 25%. In 2020, it was 31%. That is a significant increase when you think about just 1 year in time. For the first time, we also surveyed American Jews about their experiences of anti-Semitism online. And we did this because when we really think about the future of anti-Semitism, we know that the digitization of anti-Semitism really is the biggest and farthest reaching battleground. Because the internet, it's where all sources of anti-Semitism exist. It's where we see it from the far right. It's where we see it from the far left. It's where we see it from religious extremists. They all exist there simultaneously. So we want more accurate information about how American Jews are experiencing anti-Semitism online and on which platforms. And you could see all the numbers on your screen there. Facebook clearly leading the way with 62%, saying that they have been targets of anti-Semitic remarks on Facebook. You could see Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, TikTok. One of the reasons why TikTok, for example, is so low is that we only surveyed people over 18 years old, and a lot of the users of TikTok are under 18 years old. One of the things I wanted to share was in the last 2 years since the Tree of Life synagogue shooting, 24% of American Jews have actually avoided posting content that would identify them as Jewish or reveal their views on Jewish issues. So that might be like me sharing something about my proud affiliation with a Jewish institution. 24% of American Jews are now thinking twice about posting that because they're afraid of revealing their identity as a Jew. And that's terrible, and that's sad, and that's something that we need to address. As you may know, recently Facebook finally decided to ban any Holocaust denial posts. This was after the result of many organizations advocating that Facebook do that. AJC was certainly one of those organizations, and we were very pleased that in Facebook's announcement of that decision that they specifically cited only 2 organizations, one of them being AJC, and the role that we played in partnering with them to help them to understand why it's so important to take steps like that. We also asked American Jews about their views on the sources of anti-Semitism in America today. And as you can see, almost 9 in 10, or 89%, said the extreme political right was a threat. 85% said extremism in the name of Islam was a threat. And 61% said the extreme political left was a threat. So let's talk about hate crime statistics for a moment. FBI's hate crime statistics are about a year behind. So we get 2019s at the end of 2020. So we just got the 2019 stats, and you could see the number in front of you. While the Jewish community makes up about 2% of the country's population, we made up 60% of all religious biased crimes in America. This is certainly concerning, and this is also something that increased from 2018 by 14%. Drilling down a little bit more and looking at the different types of categories that exist within the FBI hate crime reporting, you could see Jewish victims of hate crime, anti-Jewish incidents, and anti-Jewish offenses. They all went up from 2018 to 2019. So let's transition a little bit to talk about the general public. One of the most significant findings, I think, is that we found almost half of US adults have either never heard the term anti-Semitism, or they've heard it, but were unsure what it means. I was personally shocked by that result. The very first question asked to US adults was, how familiar are you with the term anti-Semitism? We discovered that the 46% of US adults have either never heard of the term or have heard of the term but didn't know what it meant, compared to just over half, 53%, who have heard of it and know what it means. It's also important to note that for the purposes of the survey, that the interviewer told everyone that what anti-Semitism was before proceeding with the questions, and the way it was defined for this particular survey was hostility toward Jews, so that people could continue through the survey. Now, this lack of awareness shows us that there's so much more work that has to be done when it comes to educating the general public about what anti-Semitism means, its contemporary forms, and why combating it is so important for all of us to be able to do. Of those who had never heard of the term before, 36% had a high school education or less. So we know that education is critical here in our efforts when it comes to raising awareness. It was also significant for us to be able to compare the responses between American Jews and the US general public, and to note where they diverge. So we asked both Jewish Americans and the general public about whether anti-Semitism is a problem in America today. And while 88% of American Jews view anti-Semitism as a problem today, only 3 in 5, or 63% of US adults agree. Compared to, so one in 3 US adults do not believe that anti-Semitism is a problem in America today, compared to 1 in 10 American Jews. As we can also see, American adults are almost half as likely to believe anti-Semitism has risen in the past 5 years than Jewish Americans. 4 in 10 from the general US population versus 8 in 10 in American Jews believe that anti-Semitism has increased. And we can see that despite the attacks in Pittsburgh, in Poway, in Muncie, in Jersey City, not to mention the many assaults on visible Jews in neighborhoods in Brooklyn, the majority of Americans do not believe anti-Semitism has increased in the last 5 years. And in fact, 14% of the general population believe that anti-Semitism has actually decreased over the past 5 years. Now, in our surveys, we also asked American Jews in the general population to rank whether or not 3 statements related to Israel were anti-Semitic. The first question was on Israel's right to exist. We know that the majority of American Jews believe that denying Israel's right to exist, a key tenet of anti-Zionism, is a form of anti-Semitism. But we weren't sure what all Americans thought. Do they think similarly? And what we found was actually yes. Yes, they do. And this was a very big finding for us. 3/4 of the general population, or 74%, agree that the statement Israel has no right to exist is anti-Semitic, compared to 85% of American Jews. This really strengthens, I think, the position of the need to really understand new forms of anti-Semitism in America, and really supports our work in encouraging local and state and federal governments to consider adopting the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism, which also includes several examples of anti-Israel anti-Semitism. When it comes to some other anti-Semitic tropes, accusations of Jewish money or dual loyalty, the percentages were not quite as close. The general public is less likely to view the statements, the US government only supports Israel because of Jewish money, and American Jews are more loyal to Israel than to America, as anti-Semitic than American Jews. We think that this really speaks to a lack of understanding amongst the general public about anti-Semitism being more than simply a hatred of Jews or discrimination against them. Anti-Semitism is also this certain perception of Jews connected to accusations of power, control, money, and it's actually what makes anti-Semitism different from other forms of racism, which vilify their victims as inferior. Anti-Semitism is so unique in that it's because it perceives its target, Jews, as having too much power or too much privilege, and then attacks them for that. Both the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, which includes conspiracy theories of Jewish control and charges of dual loyalty, as well as AJC's Translate Hate Glossary, which is an educational tool of anti-Semitic terms and tropes. These are all useful tools in understanding all forms of anti-Semitism. For example, dual loyalty is a term that's explained in detail in Translate Hate, and I could send that resource to Amy to circulate out to those that are in attendance in today's conversation as well. We also asked both American Jews and the general public about their opinions on the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, BDS. For those familiar with the BDS movement, we found that majorities view BDS as having at least some anti-Semitic supporters. Less than 20% of both groups say BDS isn't anti-Semitic. If we break that down a little bit further, we asked what percentage knew what the BDS movement even was. 25% of American Jews said they were very familiar with BDS, 36% said somewhat familiar, 18% said not familiar at all. When it came to the general public, 5% of the general public said that they were very familiar with BDS, 20% said somewhat familiar. So here's another one that was extremely concerning. We found that 7 out of 10 Americans, or 72%, said that if a Jewish person or organization considered a statement or an idea to be anti-Semitic, it would either not make a difference or actually make them less likely to consider it anti-Semitic. 65% said it wouldn't make a difference, and 7% said that it would make them less likely to consider something anti-Semitic. Only 1 in 4 Americans would be more likely to listen to the Jewish community when they classify something as anti-Semitic. Now, for the group that said it would not make a difference, they may already know what anti-Semitism is, but maybe they don't. If there's a question about whether or not something is anti-Semitic, we believe the Jewish community is the arbiter there. We want to ensure that Jews can define the persecution against them. This is especially important because the Jewish community knows anti-Semitism is more than just a hatred of Jews. It's a certain perception of Jews connected to an alleged evil in the world and to harmful conspiracy theories, of power and control. And this is what makes it different from other forms of hate and bigotry. And this is the same way that we listen, to our African-American community to explain anti-Black racism, to the Muslim community to define Islamophobia, or to the LGBTQ community when they point out homophobia and transphobia. Jews' perceptions of anti-Semitism absolutely need to be listened to when determining whether or not something is or is not anti-Semitic. And what we saw in the survey was that there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. Finally, I want to present a couple of key findings on the Holocaust, specifically as it relates to Holocaust education for both Jewish Americans and the general public. Almost 1 in 4 Americans, or 24%, report knowing little to nothing about the Holocaust. This data point reflects what we've seen from other Jewish organizational surveys as well about American knowledge about the Holocaust in recent years. However, on the flip side of that, 76% say that they know some or a lot about the Holocaust. The vast majority of American Jews, 99%, know some or a lot about the Holocaust. 84% report knowing a lot. It's not just Jews that support Holocaust education, which I'm sure many of us know. The general public does as well. For both Jewish Americans and the general public, Holocaust education is important, and we saw that through this survey. 99% of Jewish Americans and 90% of the general public said that it was so important to teach about the Holocaust to middle school and high school students. For Jewish Americans, 91% said that it was very important. 8% said that it was somewhat important. Now, this is an important data point for us because it supports universal Holocaust education. We want to be sure that Holocaust education is taught in schools. We want to make sure that we're explaining to students that unfortunately anti-Semitism did not end with the Holocaust and why it's so important to continue fighting it today. Okay, so that's a lot of numbers. I'm going to stop with the numbers for a moment, and every time I look at this slide, I remind myself I need to renumber this so it says 1, 2, 3, 4, and I keep forgetting to do it, so I apologize. But I want to share with you, how does AJC plan on transforming these findings into action? For those of you that know AJC, you know that we're not just going to present a bunch of terribly sad information and just hope for the best. That's not the way we do our work. How does this report really impact our current and our future advocacy efforts? And we believe there's 4 ways that can happen. And we also believe in data-driven advocacy. So when we think about these 4 ways, or 4 ones, as you see on your screen, we believe in defining anti-Semitism. It's crystal clear from this survey that we need a definition. We were already promoting the usage of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition, as well as its pertinent examples, including when anti-Israel becomes anti-Semitism. But now, because of this data, we now have proof that a definition is needed. And we now know that the majority of Americans, Jews and non-Jews, believe that statements like Israel has no right to exist, which is a fundamental position of anti-Zionism, is anti-Semitic. This also strengthens the position of the working definition in America as a whole. The definition also covers other anti-Semitic tropes and conspiracies, like I mentioned earlier, such as dual loyalty. We can use this, we can see based on the answers given by the general public and their vast lack of knowledge of what anti-Semitism is, that this could be such a useful tool. Education, also something that we need to continue really doubling and tripling down on. We know that there's a direct correlation between a lack of knowledge of the term anti-Semitism and a lack of knowledge about the Holocaust with levels of education. So that means that we have to continue to educate about what all forms of anti-Semitism look like today. And that's why AJC published the Translate Hate Glossary that I mentioned, and we're about to publish a 2nd edition of it. We're also going to make sure that we are utilizing this survey, as we have in the Chicago region, to educate local, state, federal governmental leaders. I've probably reviewed the survey 50 times with members of Congress in Illinois, with our state representatives, with the Jewish caucus, with our diplomats here, with the Chicago Board of Rabbis. The list goes on and on. We've also been doing this in neighboring states, and our regions are sharing this result all over the United States. Building coalitions, something that AJC has long done. We need to continue to work across civil society, across religious and ethnic lines, to build these coalitions to combat anti-Semitism. We know that we are stronger in our advocacy when we're in partnership with others. And I know that Anshe Emet believes that as well, because I see all the wonderful work that you do in that area. This is also because we know that anti-Semitism is not just a Jewish problem. This is a societal problem. And it's something that we need to address together. When we combat it together, we're helping to protect our democracy, we're helping to protect our values and our liberty as Americans. Better data collection and reporting. Again, this survey revealed that 3 out of 4 American Jews, or 76%, who have been the target of anti-Semitism in the last 5 years, never reported it to anyone. We can't let anti-Semitism be normalized. We can't let someone think, oh, it wasn't that bad. It was just a swastika drawn somewhere and no one got physically hurt. And I've heard people say that. We cannot let people get to that point. It cannot be normalized. We have to demand that reports are taken seriously. We also have to demand that more data collecting and reporting is done. And again, we encourage all individuals to contact and urge their senators to support the No Hate Act, which aims to provide resources and to adequately track hate crimes, including anti-Semitic hate crimes, in all 50 states. So what can we do? I'm glad you asked. I'm glad I mentioned that you may have asked. There's a lot that we can do. And it starts with educating yourself. It starts with using and supporting resources like the IRA Working Definition of Anti-Semitism. It's using and promoting resources like AJC's Translate Hate Glossary of anti-Semitic terms and tropes. It's speaking out and being an ally, and all of you know this. All of our institutions have to make public statements when there are issues and instances of anti-Semitism. We have to continue participating in coalitions across the whole community. We can't expect others to fight for us if we're not fighting for them. And we have to restore civility to the public discourse. AJC announced at our 2019 Global Forum in Washington, D.C., the creation of our Community of Conscience, which is an initiative to help really restore the sense of civility to our daily conversations and our ability to come to the table and be okay disagreeing, but being able to do so with respect and dignity for one another. On February 2nd, AJC Chicago is proud and pleased to present our first of a 4-part series on different models of civil discourse. And in this first session on February 2nd, we'll be exploring the dignity model in civil discourse and helping people to understand how resolving conflict it's essential to be able to show up with dignity and to understand dignity. And Amy, I'll share that information with you as well for anyone that may be interested in participating. We have to advocate together, individually, together with other organizations, other communities, and we have to provide resources and support for everyone to be able to achieve these goals. You can learn more information about the full report on the website. And again, I will send the full report to Amy to share with those that are on the Zoom tonight. As I mentioned, these are just some of the numbers that we wanted to share. There's so much more to the overall report. So that was a whole lot of information, and I really appreciate everyone listening. And Rabbi Siegel, I'll turn it over to you if you wanted to moderate Q&A.
Absolutely. Laurence, thank you for a remarkable presentation. And we are grateful not only for the work of the AJC to bring all of this to our attention, but also having people like you who are fighting the fight on so many different levels as advocates of the American ideal, but also as advocates of the Jewish people. So I see a question. I see some questions in the chat, but I'm going to start, and we're going to come to the questions that are there in a moment. After reading the report and digesting it as you have, how concerned are you with the visibility of Jews in government, most notably in the new administration? When you begin to look at it, you have a Jewish Senate Majority Leader for the first time, Jewish White House Counsel, Jewish Attorney General, Jewish Secretary of State, Deputy Secretary of State, Jewish Director of Homeland Security, a Jewish Federal Reserve Chairperson, a Jewish COVID Coordinator, a Jewish CDC Director, Jewish member of Council of Economic Advisors. And of course, we shouldn't forget that our Vice President is married to a Jewish man. And to add to this, as we find our way through this impeachment quagmire, it shouldn't be lost on us that Adam Schiff represented the House in the first impeachment trial, and if this goes to a second impeachment trial, Jamie Raskin will represent the House. And so when you start to look at this and you see the kinds of anti-Semitic tropes that make open comparisons to the protocols of the elders of Zion, what do you think?
Great question. Thank you for the very easy question to lead us off, Rabbi.
I'll give you a softball before we got to the other
one. So first of all, I was thinking about that as I was watching the inauguration yesterday and just seeing the Jewish community so well represented on that stage and within the administration. And I'm also so pleased that AJC has long developed many relationships with the individuals that are now in the new Biden-Harris administration, individuals that have traveled with us to Israel, individuals that have participated in our Advocacy Anywhere programs, individuals that have attended our global forum. So we're very excited to work with the administration as well as all members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. I want to make sure to say that very clearly. I think that we can expect to see that we can expect to see their Jewish identities play a role. And I think that we can expect to see individuals utilize that for harm, and to be able to say things that may have nothing to do with the Jewish community, but because somebody is Jewish, I could see somebody trying to make a connection. And something that comes to my mind right now is I was on the phone with a Supreme Court justice in the state of Wisconsin, who is Jewish. And some of you may have read about this in the newspaper or in the media, that because of the state of Wisconsin didn't hear the concerns about the votes, and people were upset that the Supreme Court in Wisconsin didn't hear the complaint, and it very quickly became anti-Semitic to two of the female Jewish Supreme Court justices. And it's awful. There's no reason why that should have gone there whatsoever. And I do fear that we may see some of that. I do hope that it is an opportunity, though, for the many Jews that are serving in the administration and those that will hopefully be confirmed to bring more positive awareness to this community and to be able to help to break down stereotypes and barriers. I do think that could be a very positive that happens as a result of this. But yes, I share that concern that we may see these anti-Semitic tropes continue in some ways through the new administration. And given that there is such a large number of Jews in the administration, that we may see that.
I think, I couldn't agree more. And the only thing I would add to what you've said is that I think that Jews in this country need to have faith in America and demand, like any other group, that America be America. So turning to our questions, Marlene, I'm going to take Marlene Ballock's opening statement and turn it into a question. She notes that hate has been exacerbated over the last 4 years online, especially in 2020. What factor does the internet play in the speed and development of anti-Semitism in this country?
Plays a huge role. It plays an absolutely huge role. And we're seeing it as young as middle school students that are finding themselves confused and wondering why people are saying things about them as Jews online. And we're seeing it in high schools, and we're seeing it with our younger adults, and we're seeing it all over the population. And it spreads fast. And it's amazing how quickly someone can type something and click enter and not realize the damage that they can cause by something that they are saying that they may think isn't that bad. And that's where we come down to the normalization of anti-Semitism that I mentioned in the survey. And that's where resources like AJC's Translate Hate Glossary is so important, that we are able to help the community to understand when they are falling into anti-Semitic tropes and why certain phrases or words could be considered anti-Semitic or actions could be considered anti-Semitic. So we are concerned, and we also know that people can say what they want to say, whether that be on social media or in person. And someone may say something that's terribly mean. Someone could shout from the rooftops that they hate Jews. Sadly, they can do that in a social media platform, and no one can stop them from doing that. So I think what we need to do is we need to be able to equip our communities, our young people, our more seasoned people, and really equip them with understanding how to combat it. And if it's someone that somebody knows, how do you take a conversation offline and speak on the phone or in person when we can do that, and help individuals to understand the dangers of some of the actions and some of the words that some say. Now, there's also plenty of times when people see a comment from someone they don't know, and how do you address that? Going back and forth on social media and getting into arguments on social media, I don't think is necessarily healthy. I think it's always healthier to pick up the phone and call somebody, but if you don't know who the person is, being able to find a connector or someone who may be able to get through that person. We're coming back with some facts and being able to share resources online. Long way of saying it is a problem. It's going to continue to be. And I also think it's the world that we live in right now. We have to be able to share information in a factual way as quickly as we can.
I do wonder if the AJC is ever going to get involved in speaking to the leadership at Facebook and the leadership at Twitter to be more vigilant about hate speech and anti-Semitism online?
We will, and we are. And that's, I mentioned we've had a lot of conversations with Facebook, which led to their removing of Holocaust denial posts. But we also have, as one of our 2021 goals for this year, is to work with online platforms on exactly that.
Mhm.
And we're not alone. There's a lot of organizations doing that. Our approach has always been, let's advocate behind the scenes and let's get to the decision makers at these platforms. And we'd like to do that first to see if we can get somewhere, that a quiet diplomacy, and that tends to work.
Let's turn our attention to a question from Lisa Orbach. And she wants you to clarify your definition of Zionism. And she speaks about the fact that she agrees with the belief of many early Zionists. The Jews have a right to live as a free people and in their ancestral homeland. However, she is opposed to what she believes is the undemocratic basis of the current state of Israel. She's a devout Jew. And what she asks is, does my moral and philosophical viewpoint make me a supporter of an anti-Semitic viewpoint? And while she personally opposes BDS, she supports their right to express their views in public. What's your reaction to that?
My reaction is it's a very good question. It's an important question for people to hear and for people to understand. Criticism, not all criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. And we talk about that a lot within AJC. We talk about that a lot with younger generation, that we see a lot of involvement in the progressive movement as well. And I would add that you can certainly be critical of any nation state, and that doesn't make somebody anti a nation state. I could be critical of the decisions that the American government makes without making me be un-American or anti-American. I think it's healthy to criticize in a way that helps to get our point across. When it becomes problematic for the Jewish community is when we are questioning things like Israel's right to exist. I mean, as we saw in the survey results showed that the American Jewish community and the general public thought that the BDS movement had some anti-Semitic supporters, but not all. So they had some anti-Semitic supporters. Criticism of Israel does not make somebody anti-Semitic. And we talk about that frequently with our work with AJC. When the topic of annexation was most recently brought up by the Prime Minister, AJC spoke out about our concerns with that. And some of our colleagues wrote an op-ed, and we did an Advocacy Anywhere program on it. AJC is not afraid to speak up when we need to.
Good. Look, I don't think there's any question that the issues that Elise raises are only going to become intensified as the younger generation finds their voice and speaks more loudly. And so these are real questions that I think the Jewish community is going to have to think long, the American Jewish community is going to have to think long and hard about how to answer, as well as our brothers and sisters in Israel. So thanks for the question, Elise. I would turn my attention to Lauren Taylor Moran. And she says, there are lots of different kinds of anti-Semitism. How would someone know where or how to report an anti-Semitic event? And could this be a reason that many go unreported if people don't know where to go with the information?
Another great question. And that certainly could be a reason why some incidents go unreported. Every opportunity we have, we encourage people, if you experience an anti-Semitic incident, call the FBI, call the police, let AJC know. The ADL tracks this information as well. There's no shortage of individuals that can be called, and we all talk to one another. But absolutely, there are times when people don't know where to report it, which is why we always talk about this in every opportunity we have. And we also make sure that when we're providing our education and training to law enforcement, that they understand when they need to classify something as anti-Semitic. And again, that's why we really utilize the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism, because it provides some examples. And of course, you always have to take into consideration the context in which they take place. Another reason, and I'll give an example actually, there was a small business owner in a west suburb of Chicago that had contacted me. It was someone that I had already known. And he said, there's been a swastika drawn on my storefront. What do I do? And I said, well, you call the police is what you need to do, and you should do that today. And he said, I don't want to do that because I don't want to be the subject of a media story, which could then lead Jews to be scared to come to my shop. And that hit me hard. It also speaks to the percentage of Jews that we saw that are avoiding certain places out of fear of their identity. And we have to be able to get past that. We have to make people feel comfortable in reporting, and we have to make the Jewish community not feel afraid to go places because of their identity. Also why we need to continue to invest in security for Jewish institutions, and businesses need to think about how they continue to invest in security. But there's several reasons, and certainly one of those is that people may not know where to go to report it. So I ask all of you on the Zoom today that you remember that you call the police, you call the FBI, you let AJC know, you let ADL know, you let your synagogue know, and make sure that those in your network know to do the same.
I just want to add to your answer something that Cheryl Kaplan makes clear, and that she talks about the fact that there are, when you report something, there is often retaliation. So this storefront, this store owner whose storefront was affected, that story really redounds throughout the community. The child who gets up and says and speaks out goes to the principal. The person on a college campus who speaks out, there are often, too often, retaliation, and that makes it that much harder. Good. And let's talk, as long as we're talking about school, what's AJC doing on college campuses? And since we're bringing this up, I'm going to, when you finish your answer, I'm going to ask Amy to talk about 2 more programs that are coming around the corner for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And as you may have picked up in Rabbi Siegel's introduction of me, this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. My background is in higher education. I spent 18 years working with college students before coming to work for AJC. And the answer is yes, we are doing something about this on college campuses. We have a National Department of Campus Affairs that works very closely with the Israel on Campus Coalition, that works very closely with Hillel, that works very closely with other campus Jewish organizations. The AJC Chicago Regional Office, and actually before I get to that, we also have trips to Israel through our Project Interchange program. And Phil Stern, who's on the Zoom tonight, is on the Project Interchange board for AJC. We bring chancellors and presidents to Israel. We're launching a vice presidents of student affairs trips to Israel as soon as it's safe to travel again. In the AJC Chicago Regional Office, we recently embarked on what we're calling a campus listening tour. Of course, it's virtual, where we've now held conversations with senior student affairs administrators at Indiana University, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, the University of Illinois Chicago, Northwestern University, and the University of Chicago. And what we're first doing is we are getting to hear more from them about what they believe to be the concerns of Jewish students on campus. What are they seeing? What types of trends are they identifying? Are their numbers of reports going up? Do they feel Jewish students are safe on campus? Every campus has its own differences, and it's important to us that we take the time to listen and learn, just like we do in all aspects of our work. What we're doing from there is we're sharing with them the same results of this survey that I shared with all of you tonight, to help them to understand where American Jews and the general public sit on their thoughts on anti-Semitism in America today. We are providing them resources like the Translate Hate Glossary. We are encouraging them to include compulsory training on anti-Semitism prevention and helping students to understand what anti-Semitism is when they start college. We are connecting them with others within the AJC community that could help them, whether they be an alum of that institution or connected to AJC in other ways, to also be advocates for their work. We're encouraging the adoption of the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism on college campuses. And we're also starting before they get to college through our Leaders for Tomorrow program, which Anshe Emet has been very helpful in helping to promote over the years. We're bringing together high school students to help them to understand advocacy skills that they will need when they get to college, to stand up for themselves, to stand up for the Jewish community, to understand how to confront anti-Semitism that they're experiencing in high school and sadly will likely experience on college campuses as well.
Amy, do you want to just take a second and
Sure.
Laurence, I just want to thank you for what you're doing on college campus, what AJC is doing for your own personal interest, because it's so very important.
Thank you.
Yeah, stepping from that direction, as part of our Stand Up to Hate series, we have two college students that Barry Weiss has specifically talked about on her Yom Kippur speech, which is Blake Flayton and Rose Rich, one of GW and one of USC, who have both experienced anti-Semitism in a very personal way and have stood up to anti-Semitism in very different ways. That's on February 2nd. And on February 9th, we are hosting 5 Hillel directors, executive directors from across the country, talking about what their response is to anti-Semitism and hate crimes on the campuses. So those are being advertised, so please look out, and we hope to see you there as well.
I want to go back to Israel for a second, because the reality is, and this, I want to pick up something that Deborah Gubin is raising. The Jewish community is very divided on Israel, and certainly we heard part of that in Elisa's question. But in the past presidential election, the split in the American Jewish community remains profound. And so Deborah Gubin's question is, considering the number of Jews in the Biden administration, do you think that will have an effect of calming the concerns of some in the Jewish press that this administration will be anti-Israel? In other words, if Jews are representing positions on Israel that are different than the Trump administration, will that blunt whatever claims that some may have that this administration is anti-Israel, or even anti-Israel? Go ahead, Laurence.
I think time will tell. I don't know that I could give you a definitive answer one way or the other on that. I think that the natural response would usually be to think, yeah, it should calm some of the concerns. It should, but we have seen otherwise in other areas of society and other parts of the country and other parts of the world. So it should, but I think that the simple answer there is that time will tell.
I want to acknowledge Ed Pearson. This is building on the question that Jay Lefkowitz and I were both asking. Jews are heading 2 vital parts of the new financial administration. Do you see this causing even more problems?
I saw that question in the chat and I immediately thought, I hadn't honestly thought of that before. When thinking about certain anti-Semitic tropes, sadly, I could see something coming of that and someone trying to make some connection to Jews with money and power and the tropes that we talk about in our Translate Hate Glossary and through the report that we did. It's certainly possible. And I hope it's not the case, but I could see that happening.
Looking at the scene in America, I was especially taken, amongst other things, with the report that Jews are hiding Jewish symbols more presently than they have in the past. And in some ways, that reflects the European experience. Certainly, if you travel to England or to France, back in the day when we actually traveled to places like that, people will advise you to not wear a kippah outside, right? Or to hide any jewelry that might have a Star of David on it. What do you think of the notion that America is different because, unlike Europe, there is no history of state-sponsored anti-Semitism in this country, and therefore comparisons between the anti-Semitism of Europe and the anti-Semitism of America are qualitatively different?
I think you raise an excellent point. And what I would say to that is that we can't let the United States turn into some of the experiences that people have had in Europe or in other countries. And we can't let these numbers, as frightening as they may be, make us think twice about, oh, maybe I should put that star away, or maybe I should not have a mezuzah up in my house. We can't be thinking that way. We have to continue to show our Jewish pride outwardly and proudly. And I think about January of 2020, when AJC put together the hashtag Jewish and Proud social media campaign. And this was following what seemed to be every night of Hanukkah of a violent anti-Semitic attack and to visibly Jewish individuals in parts of Brooklyn. And we put together this campaign, certainly much more than a campaign, but this one particular day, to remind the American Jewish community that we are Jewish and we are proud and we will always remain Jewish and proud. And it was incredible to see not just Jews, but allies come together through the social media campaign and share why they are Jewish and proud, or why they are a Jewish ally and proud. And in Chicago, what started to be a group of 9 AJC Chicago staff members going to the Bean downtown to take a picture holding Jewish and proud signs turned into such a larger event when the Chicago Tribune decided to write about this campaign. Soon our phones were ringing off the hook with community members wanting to know if they could come join us. And we ended up with well over 100 individuals holding these Jewish and proud signs right in downtown. And of course, when I realized how many people were going to be there, I did call the police, and I wanted to have some people there just because of what we have seen. But what a beautiful display it was of pride, and what a beautiful display it was of Judaism, and how incredible it was to hear one of our board members, Ellen Cannon, start a chant Jewish and proud, and to hear 100 people, it was more than 100 people, start chanting that as well. And I get goosebumps when I say it. So it is not what we saw in other countries. It will not become what we've seen in other countries. Are the statistics a little frightening? Yes. Should we be concerned? Yes. Are there things that we can all do about it to make sure that it never becomes a type of an issue where a newspaper in Germany is advising people against wearing a kippah? Or I'm sorry, the rabbi in Germany is advising people against it, and then the German newspaper puts out the front page with a cutout kippah so people can wear it? That's not going to happen here. We all just have to make sure that we're continuing to do our part.
I do want to take note of Cheryl Kaplan's story that she had a swastika drawn in her garage. And the fact that she got a letter from her alderman apologizing, right, speaks again to this notion that America remains different in that way. And that we can call on our public officials, and I've found, and I'm sure you have as well, Laurence, that our public officials are very open to this conversation. And it's an important one. I'm going to ask one more question, and unless there's any other questions, we'll end it in a few minutes. We hear quite a bit today about the notion of privilege, right? White privilege and opportunities that are afforded to certain groups or people of a certain color of skin that aren't afforded to other groups, right? And when Jews speak of hate or anti-Semitism, I wonder how much this notion of privilege gets in the way of people's understanding of the depth of concern that the Jewish community has, right? There's sometimes a confusion between wealth and opportunity and the real concerns of anti-Semitism. I wonder if you'd comment.
It reminds me, Rabbi Siegel, of over the summer on Twitter, there was something trending, and it was hashtag Jewish privilege. And it was in response to exactly what you're talking about right now. And there are a lot of Jewish individuals that want to be part of addressing some of the biggest challenges that we're seeing in our communities today when it comes to racial healing and when it comes to the divides in cities. And the best thing that we can do is to continue to listen, to continue to share the struggles that we all face, and to understand one another. And just joining the conversation that you had, Rabbi Siegel, with Pastor Harris and with Sydney Wallace. I spoke to her today, by the way. She says hello. And just seeing the dynamics and the relationships that are built. I mean, that's how we are able to best understand the challenges that all of our communities face. Yeah. The second we start making assumptions is the second that we all lose our respective battles that we're fighting for. So it really reminds me of what we saw on Twitter all summer. And Luckily, we haven't continued to see that, but we have to ask the questions. We have to listen. We have to understand one another. You know, the whole phrase, putting myself in someone else's shoes, it's hard to do that. You just have to listen to those that are wearing the shoes. You have to listen to people and hear their experiences, and trust that what we're all doing is trying to help one another, I think.
Well, on behalf of all of us, Laurence, we thank you, because it has been a true privilege, and I mean that in the most positive ways, to listen to you tonight. And again, we thank you for all the AJC is doing. And I'm going to leave the ending of the program to Amy to just talk a little bit about the programs coming up next week. Thank you, Laurence.
Thank you for having me.
Beginning on Sunday and Monday, the film Rosenwald will be available for those who registered for the program. You'll be able to view it on a Vimeo link in the privacy of your home. And on Tuesday night, Rabbi Siegel will be leading a panel discussion with Pastor Harris, Aviva Kempner, who is the director of the film, Julius Rosenwald's grandson, and Barbara Boxman, who is Valerie Barrett's mother, who attended one of the schools. So that is on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. The registration links are available online. So we hope to see more of you there as well.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much, Larry.